Oh,
All right.
we're live. I think we are
Yeah.
live. Hey, Patty. Oh, we are live. So it says, Patty, can you hear us? Because we know you're here. Maybe. So, if you want to, let's introduce ourselves. Hi, I'm Diana Gasparoni, and I'm the founder of BeWELL Psychotherapy. And I am super excited that tonight our wellness talk, ooh, thank you, Patricia, is bringing in our new director of health and well-being. And you guys may have seen us. We've been doing a lot. We've been conquering all technology this month. And today, when we're done with this, we are going to do a deep dive into the stars to find out what days moving forward we should be touching anything tech, any kind of tech without an IT person. And that by that we mean anybody under 30 in the room with us. But so in coming up in September, we are launching Indigo 108, which is the new health and well-being initiative at BeWELL. And I'm gonna just let my dear friend, now colleague, Liz, tell you all about who she is and her new role with me and my team.
Thank you, Diana. And yeah, let's keep fingers crossed that the tech remains stable during this. My name is Liz Bueller-Walker, and I am a yoga and meditation facilitator and Ayurvedic practitioner, and I work the principles of Ayurveda into my work with clients. And Ayurveda and yoga are sister sciences from India. So they are sciences for liberation, they're sciences for wellness, holistic wellness. So they are systems not just for as a remedy to ailings, but they're systems to cultivate and foster well-being, both personally and collectively. So that is why I just joined the team at BeWELL Psychotherapy, because these are the practices and some of the ways into holistic wellness that are going to complement the things that you all at BeWELL Psychotherapy have already been doing and will continue to do in terms of centering and really anchoring into mental health and well-being, and now supporting that work and integrating that work into the body as well. So Diana and I both have had many conversations about this over the 20 plus years that we've known each other, and both of us feel and have experienced and have worked with people in a way that has shown us really what the ancient seers were telling us all along, and modern science is now supporting and creating evidence for, that physical and mental go together, that they are interwoven, that when you can get physical and mental wellness in sync with one another, that is when you're able to function at your most optimal level.
Yes. And I am super excited. And I think we should thank you so much, Liz. And I think we should pull up the slides, because I was going to go off on a tangent, and I want to make sure that like I'm following along. So as I start to think of different things that, and I have some really interesting examples to use tonight, because
good.
I was talking earlier today about the program itself and how the two will really intersect, how these two practices, the psychotherapy practice, the psychodynamic work that we do at BeWELL, and the integrated work that we're going to bring in through Indigo 108, and how we are going to live almost in the room together, but like really support each other in the best in the best, most powerful way that we can. And I think this.
So can you see the screen?
I can totally see the screen. And what I think is really an important conversation to really start with is, what does it mean to be well? And I think that we can all answer that in our own way. And for me, and the mission with my organization has always been to be well really means that your physical and your emotional body find a state of balance, and that in that balance is not how we live our lives in any way, shape, or form. So like, how to really be able to bring the two practices into one place to find that balance, because something is always out of whack. And so really being well is paying attention to the alchemy of the back and forth, like where to tweak, what to do, how to find a balance, to find a place that of well-being in your life. And that is what it means to me to be well.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, because it is for each person to decide for themselves what being well means, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I also like that. I think something that's happened in wellness conversations is this idea of balance. And when you really go back to the root of things with Ayurveda, for instance, which is a system that's 5,000 years old, that comes from India, there's an expectation that imbalances occur, right? That's like how the whole thing works, which is based on awareness of, what does it feel like when I feel well? And then when can I notice that I am out of balance? And then how can I use tools, whether it's tools for the mind, or tools for the body, or tools for the spirit, or tools for some integrated tools to come back to that place where I feel and I know that I am well.
Yeah.
So it's each person is actively engaged in their own wellness, and they get to decide what it feels like and what it looks and acts like.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of empowerment, ownership of your own well-being in all of the work. Okay, tell us.
So yeah, I just thought it would be nice to sort of start this off. And I like this quote, that this idea of this, the wellness continuum that Resmaa Menakem talks about in his book, My Grandmother's Hand. So I'll just read it real quick. In today's America, we tend to think of healing as something binary. Either we're broken or we're healed from that brokenness. But that's not how healing operates, and it's almost never how human growth works. More often, healing and growth take place on a continuum, with innumerable points between utter brokenness and total health. And I like this quote, because also I think this thing in the wellness world that gets talked about is, like that there are these prerequisites to being well, right? That like you have to, or, I'll speak from my perspective in yoga. So often I hear people say, well, I'm not flexible enough to do physical yoga. And it's like this thing of like, that's not for me. And to reframe the conversation in this way that Menakem has, which is, yes, wellness is for everyone, wherever you are at this point in your life on this continuum. And wellness doesn't only happen when there is no brokenness left in you either, when you're not struggling anymore.
I love that. And I love everything about, like, and in my journey when I was a yoga teacher, the number of times that I've heard, it's not for me. I'm not flexible enough. And you're like, oh, but you have a body. So like, we can start with like little movements, and like every time we get together and talk, I think of another antidote from like my life in general. And I used to teach yoga to this woman whose name I couldn't put my finger on. It was before I went to social work school, and I would like go across, I lived uptown at the time, and I would go across Central Park and I would come over to her house. And I remember one day we were having this conversation, and we were talking about her feet. And she said to me, but my feet always hurt. And I was like, do they have to? She, like, the concept that she could actually have comfortable feet and be comfortable in her feet, on her feet, like in her feet, had never crossed her mind. She was like, well, they just hurt. And I'm like, well, can we move them? She's like, they don't move. I'm like, they did at one point. Like it was like an acceptance of where she was without the idea, without opening the mind up to the idea that there was other pathways that were like she went so far into like how much pain it would be, and not like the small intricate movement that you could do to just open up a little channel of energy one at a time. Like it didn't have to be so big, right? Which when we talk about that, we talk about it in the therapy room in a very similar way. Like somebody can come to me for years and I won't interpret for them what I see, because I know that it would be too much or too painful for them to handle. Or, I mean, if they don't come to it on their own, like I could make a mistake and like blow up a defense in a way that makes no sense. So like really taking in the information slowly and like hearing it and helping them piece it together. I mean, for me, there's like no way that these two practices don't live together. There's just no way. Like we have such incredible information in the body and in the mind. So I'm very touched by my grandmother's hands. I love it.
You made me remember a story too of a client that I used to work with who was, probably in his 60s. He had worked really hard. He was a newspaper guy. So from holding the newspapers, like working with the newspapers, for so many years, his hands were locked in this kind of a state. And he couldn't spread his fingers out. But we were working together over time. And one time he just randomly in a session said, I can reach and get my seatbelt and put it on without pain now. And that's something that I never would have known was a goal. He probably didn't know that it was a goal of his, but that's meaningful. Like that is meaningful movement. That is about mobility. That is about having the extra brain space to not think about that and just be able to do that and be safe and all
it's about there's so much safety in that, like how that changes the impact of how you feel in your car, how you feel, get it, like just the anxiety of standing at the door of your car to open your car door puts you in a state to drive that is, not ideal, not optimal. And then this freedom that you have, because in the conversation from the body to in the mind and the body is, if something happened, I would be in more pain.
Right.
Like in the car, like that's the conversation. So this freedom then allows not only for the freedom of the arm, because we don't always think about this, it allows for more freedom in the thoughts, which then allows for more freedom in your life, like in general, like your life, like his hand opened and his life got bigger.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I'm equipped to work on the openings. Right. And then just a beautiful prospect to think about then taking that into the therapy room and being like, and now what does this mean? Like, what do I need to mourn that I didn't have that for many, many years? what does it mean for me moving forward? What does this open me up to? All of those things.
Yeah. So many things.
I think this quote also from Bessel van der Kolk speaks to something similar from his book, The Body Keeps the Score. If an organism is stuck in survival mode, right, the trauma response, its energies are focused on fighting off unseen enemies, which leaves no room for nurture, care, and love. For us humans, it means that as long as the mind is defending itself against invisible assaults, our closest bonds are threatened, along with our ability to imagine, plan, play, learn, and pay attention to other people's needs.
Oh, I have so much to say about this one.
Maybe sometime we should just do quotes. When we do the IG lives, we should just do a quote every once in a while.
Yeah, we should. So this one, and because I have been listening to his book, and I have to go in and actually buy it and read it and like dig deep. He's got a beautiful voice though. With the trauma, and this is something that we're all talking in my field now about trauma informed, and it's happening in yours as well, right? Trauma informed therapy.
Yes.
Like really being mindful and listening for where the trauma, what the trauma is, where it is. And the trauma is, there's the event that is traumatic, and then there is the trauma, which is what continually lives on, right? Like we bring that with us. That is the trauma. There's a terrible event, and how we respond to that terrible event has to do with our own developmental stages. Like that you and I can, and we see it right now, right? Like we are in a traumatic time. We have all experienced the same traumatic event. We were all told to go home. And how we have responded, it's a terrible thing that has happened to us, but it is also an amazing way to be able to talk about it. So like how we have all responded and like where it all is, where we all sit with this particular traumatic event and how we continue to respond is just like from a psychological point of view, it's an incredible thing to observe, right? Like I am observing in my work, like which one of my patients is having a terrible time and which one of my patients is like, okay, whatever, like I got this. And really where being able to like find in the body, right? Because we see like the response in the anxiety. I'm seeing the responses in the illnesses, the psychosomatic things that are happening to people, where they are somatizing for sure, where it's coming up in their sleep, where it's coming up in their dreams, like what is really like going on in the body. I see it in myself as well. I'm not going to leave myself out of that. And then how we continue to respond, and then what we can do with really you sitting in the room with you and gently getting into the body and being able to then come over to the therapy side and talk about what that experience was like. I mean, I don't even know. I could cry. I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know, right? None of us ever knows how the trauma is going to land for us or which trauma is going to really affect us. And but it keeps coming, that's for sure. And even now, as we hopefully become more globally aware and connected with one another, like what's happening right now with the evacuations in Afghanistan and this like very rapid shocking
Awful.
exodus from Afghanistan of the U.S. aid and military, and like all of the war that has led up to this point, and then what's going on in Haiti with the earthquake and now hurricane and all of this, that like we feel it intensely, right? The people who are there who are most impacted are, it's landing directly on them, and then but we all take it on and hopefully learn to hold it together. And one of my good friends who I study with sometimes, Francesca Maxime, is a somatic practitioner, and sometimes it feels so big that there's just so much and it just keeps coming and it keeps piling on, some more than others. And I said to her once, but what can we do? And she told this story about Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks about if you're on a ship in a stormy sea and everyone is panicking, can you be the one that is at least calm so that you don't add to the panic? Can you be the one? Can we develop this capacity and these tools and these ways of helping each other regulate both in the body and in the mind, to regulate the nervous system, to be calm, to be able to see clearly, right? The discernment that we talk about in yoga, to be able to see the situation for what it is, to see the suffering for what it is, and to not add more harm, more suffering for ourselves and each other. So, I mean, it's big, and it can get really small, but whatever we do for ourselves individually, ultimately, hopefully, has this impact on others as well, which is why I like what Vanderkolk says here about it allows you to then also pay attention to the needs of other people that you cannot if you're in a survival state.
If you're in survival state, and I am so glad you circled back to that, because the other part of the individual work is that we thrive as human beings through relationship with others. Like in our ability to be with another person and to be in community and to be around loved ones and to be around colleagues and to be out in the world is dependent on how we nurture and care for ourselves. And in survival mode, there's no resources left for anyone else.
Right.
And you just become more and more isolated, which, using the pandemic again, which is the thing that we as clinicians on the mental health side were the most concerned about, is that we wanted to make sure that we were all, and we had multiple conversations about this as a team, that we were looking at what our patient load was doing. And I was also very much involved in, or encouraging, I should say, of the staff to make sure that they were taking care of themselves enough and making sure that they were being around their people in a way, in as much of a capacity as they could, depending on where we were on the continuum of this time. Which is, how this all happened while we were out.
It's true.
It's true.
It's true.
Making sure we were taking care of ourselves. Yeah.
And staying connected in the ways that we could, and then things things that viveka, that discernment of like, well, what am I doing here? Is my work effective in the way that I'm doing it right now? And so we dreamed up this to make it the most effective that we felt like, or at least to try this method to see how effective it can be.
Yes. And so how yoga can help. Go ahead.
So some of the reasons why both you and I felt like Indigo 108 was an important thing to bring to BeWELL as part of your vision, and then to add the yoga to mental health, which was part of my vision, bringing it in. Are there these very specific kind of techniques and ways that yoga can help? So with mindful movement, you're moving your body, you're in your body, and you're drawing the mind into the body. So the example of the client that you had who said, but my feet hurt all the time, that's even the next step to that would be not even realizing that your feet are hurting, right? And
Yep.
just be like moving less or standing less or doing less, or, you know,
Yeah.
all, or walking differently, or all of those things. So so the drawing the mind down into the body and having an awareness, for one thing, it creates more perspective and clarity of vision. And for another thing, it it harnesses the mind, so it kind of gives the mind a break from all of the scattered sort of calculating that it often does in survival mode.
Mm-hmm.
Breathing techniques. There are so many different breathing techniques for different purposes, for different people that work differently in different situations. And so just having all of this wealth of information and technique to draw from for either activating the nervous system if someone's feeling really down, or for calming the nervous system if they're really sort of up high.
And a little side note in here, because I do find that we use techniques, and I hear it a lot from other clinicians, of like identifying if people are breathing or bringing breathing practices into the room. And I've also been on these calls or in these supervisions or wherever they are, and been like, oh, I'm going to just do, because I hear, like, what's important is to understand exactly what they're saying to do with the breath. And we, for the, and if there's some therapists out there, if we haven't studied pranayama and we haven't studied how really intricate breath work can be, we may be agitating the anxiety instead of bringing it down, or agitating the panic instead of bringing it down, or suppressing the nervous system when we should be bringing it up. And I think that the more language, and this isn't what they came for, to me, right? Like, I can give you like 3, 2, 1. Like, I can tell you that, like, if you follow your breath, you can probably notice that your mood will change. I personally could probably say a little bit more because of my history with pranayama, but that's not my role in the room right then. My role in the room is to really examine why we need the breath work to begin with. Like, that's my job. My job is to help you understand what the thoughts and the pattern of thoughts that got us to this state were. Now, if I need more techniques, my next job is to make sure you have the resources to get them. That is my job. And that's where this work is so important to be together, and why the two are going to live in the same place.
And we've talked, I feel like, Diana, quite a bit about like what's happening in the body and then taking it into the therapy room. But this is an example of like what's happening in the therapy room, and then if it's at BeWELL, right, then we'll be able to be in communication, the therapist and myself, and the therapist can say, this is an issue that we're talking about in therapy, and we talked about maybe breathing would help. So can you all work on some breathing when you work together on your work? Like in my, can we then take it
in your lane, in your room over here? Like, because I know that unless you have done like a deep dive into pranayama, you don't really like the full capacity of the lungs, the full capacity of everything that happens with your nervous system, how to really be in that breath without becoming more agitated, which, I mean, I've screwed that up personally. Been like, I feel like I feel really hot, or I feel, like things like that, like, for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so then we have the other techniques, right? Then we have other, like, maybe non-pranayama techniques for grounding that can, that we can work with. That's why it being interactive is really important too. Thank you
Yeah.
for bringing that. And then similarly, orienting in space, right? That like when we can feel our bodies and use our senses and be in tune with our senses and our internal landscape and our external landscape, then we can orient like, oh, this is the space that I'm in. This is the physical body space that I'm in. This is the surrounding space that I'm in. I do or do not feel safe in this space. I can or cannot go to certain places emotionally in this space. And so it's just developing these tools of perception so that we, each person, can decipher how deep they want to go, how deep they can go, when they need to pull back, when they need to go deeper, like all of those things, based on their own sense of self. And I love the idea of having like some physical orienting before you go in for your talk therapy, and then having some physical orienting after you come out of your talk therapy. So those will be some of the tools that we'll be working on passing to people in the Indigo 108 program that they can then try out for themselves.
I love it.
And then the fact that it happens in real time, right? So one of the things that is often talked about with trauma, and you may be able to speak more about this, Diana, you already mentioned it a little bit, is that there's like a traumatic event or series of events that that happen, and then they live in the body and in the consciousness, and so the past is now brought to the present. And so one of the greatest things we can do with yoga is have an awareness of like, this is what's happening right now in real time for me. This is my inhale. This is my exhale. This is me moving forward. This is me moving backward. And also this like doing one thing at a time is so important when we're used to sort of like being inundated with information and tasks that we're doing all at once.
Yeah, and I mean, I can speak to it from so many different lenses, but really, when the person is in the room, in the treatment room, the bringing all the information of like, it's the experience of being there with me is some of it is reporting, some of it is going back into the past, some of it is staying in the present, some of it is making change for your future. But like, to have the ability to look at like, okay, well, what's really getting in your way? Let's tease it out a little bit and let's find out, and like be able to identify how a mindfulness practice would help move from this move to a goal, or move, or not even, I mean, it might not even be a goal. It might just be an experience. It might be whatever the case may be. And like, when someone, I mean, we call them chittavrittis, or the monkey mind in yoga, but when we see it in the work in the room, and it comes up as anxiety, and it comes up as ADHD, or it comes up as grief, or it comes up as depression, and those are real, very, very real things. And then we take this mindful work and we layer it into, okay, well, we see that this is happening, like we see it all. Let's figure out what created this pattern, right? Because one of the things that's really important to remember is, for the work that we do on the therapy side, it's been repeated and repeated and repeated, and we repeat because it's what keeps us alive and keeps us from going crazy, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing it for the right reasons, but we have adapted, and whether it's a maladaptive behavior, which is one of my favorite terms, or not, it has created a pattern for you to survive, right? So back to survival mode. And then to come back and be able to sit in the present, and maybe it's just to get rid of all your emails that you're not opening. Like, it could be that simple, right? That the mindfulness practice is helping you open your mail. is helping your paper mail or helping you open your email. And then the therapy practice is like, yo, girl, why are you avoiding your mail? Like, let's find out what's on the other side. Like, what are you going to do? But you're like, we're going to go one piece at a time. What's the worst? Like, and he or she will come with the question of like, what's the worst that could happen? And like from the therapist. So it's really, God, I'm so excited. And I mean, we were talking about this earlier today, you and I, and I'm like, one of the things that's been really exciting as we're building this program and as we're talking about it, and like it's reigniting all of my past work into my present work. And that is just, I mean, life doesn't get better than that.
Yeah. And when, it's when you look back and you see like, oh, at this time in my life, I was really leaning into these practices. At this time in my life, I was really going, like therapy was what was really doing it for me. At this time in my life, then I switched up how I was doing my practice. And, but that there is that thread that goes all the way through. Mm-hmm. Which brings me to the last thing, which is that there's such a wide range of practices to draw from for different people, for different lived experiences, for different times in someone's life, for different kind of like personalities, or for different maladaptive behaviors, or in yoga we would say like negative samskaras, right? That there's a different practice that you can do to shift out of the samskara or the impression, the habit that has imprinted onto you that is now taking you to a negative place, that you can use particular practices to then shift that out of that and into what you need to be doing right now that's that is adaptive and is supportive.
And I will say that when I was in my analytic training and I was in some class, and one of the facilitators, the professor, was talking about this need to repeat, whether it's good or it's bad or like whatever the case may be, we need to repeat it, and we continually repeat it, and it creates a rhythm, and it creates whatever it is in your life, and you become it. It helps you to build your defenses so that you can go out into the world, right? Like it does the thing. And I was like, "Do you mean Sukha and Dukkha?" he was like, "I don't know what you're talking about, Miss Gasparoni." And I go, "I think that somebody figured this out like 5,000 years ago, but okay, I'm good."
It's such a good point. And, we need, talking of repetition, right? We need to repeat and
we do
contextualize. We need to contextualize in order to have access to the power of these practices. And we also need to look back and say, and it's not new. It's not new. It's just like showing up in a different way.
Absolutely.
Okay. So speaking of ancient, this is from Acharya Shunya's book, Ayurveda Lifestyle Wisdom. How profound are the insights of Ayurveda, existing thousands of years and declaring that a body well rested, well fed, comfortable in its natural rhythms, and supported by peaceful contemplation will rejuvenate itself again and again. This is the promise of Ayurveda.
I mean, I'm going to let you take this one because you know what? One of the things, we can do this all day. So you go.
We can. And we should start to wrap up, but it's just to me we know how to heal ourselves. We need each other to do it. Yes. And to like guide each other through it. And because relationship, much of it has to be done in relationship with each other. But our bodies know how to do this, right? It's rest. How much do we hear people talking about sleep right now? Sleep disturbances. It's it's being well fed, nutrition, digestion. How much do we hear people talking about like not being able to digest, or like not having a relationship with their food? Natural rhythms, like where do I thrive? Where do I do well? With whom? In what situations? And then the contemplation of like pausing, stopping, turning the stuff off, and just turning inward, and knowing yourself, like having a relationship with yourself. And so it's all there. That's one of the things that in the philosophy of yoga and Ayurveda, which is like this ability to heal, this ability to know yourself, this deep knowledge and wisdom is there. And it's about uncovering, taking the obstacles away, which often I think happens in the therapy room too. This idea of peeling the onion, getting to the root. We're just going to go layer by layer. We're not going to drill right in. We're going to go each piece layer by layer to really get at the heart of it.
And in the therapy room, what's always very interesting to me is, like, I personally believe that therapy is a lifelong process, right? Like, it doesn't, and it definitely does not have to be that way for every person. And I understand that. And like, I am fortunate that it is something that I have access to, and that is built into the framework of the work that I do, that like being in my own treatment allows me to be, encourages me, makes me, helps me, and really it is how I am good at my job and can stay present at my job.
Right.
So I would never stop doing it for that reason. It's like, if I was playing guitar, I would never stop tuning my guitar. So I'm always
Right.
going to, I'm always going to, tune my mind. But that being said, one of the things that I always think about is, I've never been this person that I am today, ever, because I wasn't, like, yesterday was a different experience. So like, there's always going to be something that I'm going to learn, that I'm going to be able to learn about myself the next day, right?
Yeah.
And the same, like with Ayurveda and these practices, there's always an opportunity. Like, I'm always going to be continually changing, right? Like,
Right.
I'm in a completely different stage of my life than I ever fantasized I would be. And then I was like, oh, this is fascinating. And like, how to really like use that lifestyle wisdom, which is a beautiful way to put it, and incorporate that into all of the other beautiful work that I have access to and have been able to do. It's been a gift. But this Pitta Kapha might be calling calling to the end of the day pretty soon.
Exactly. All right, let's go through this last slide, and
We
we
have
talked
one
about
more.
a lot of this already. So this is like what are we getting at? What are we trying to get at? And Acharya Shunya says vitality and joy, and then Johns Hopkins medicine says eliminating impurities, which doesn't sound quite as inspiring. But this is like what we're looking for, is like clearing out the old, right? Clearing out the maladaptive behaviors, clearing out the physical stagnancies, reducing the symptoms, so that we're not just trying to like, take care of this here and fix that there, but that things are sort of like working in tune. But I like that like tuning your instrument image, increasing. And then therefore, if we're like functioning and joyful, then maybe we have a little more reserve or capacity to resist disease. I want to be really careful here that we're not saying Western medicine is not needed, or
No, I think it's it doesn't, and I don't hear that. And I think that's a very important point, is that part of taking care of yourself and being well and being present and being in your body is also being able to advocate for yourself with your medical doctor, being able to look at the pain that you're experiencing, if it is chronic, if these you can then say, I am unable to do, no matter what, I can't, there's nothing, I cannot do this, right? Like, and
Right.
like that compliment also, like, we are here to help you find that voice and
Yeah.
that 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 true nature that goes in, is like, I want to feel and live in this body as fully as I can, which requires you to be able to tell your doctor something, tell your
Yeah.
dentist something. Like, those
Right.
people, right, are people that like also work with us, people like us, to keep you like feeling your best, as
Yeah.
you should. And my hope is that people will, and this is the work within the work that I have already have been doing for years and years and years, is that we are as preventative as possible,
Mm-hmm.
right? The other thing about, early in my psychotherapy career, I went to a fundraiser for the analytic school that I will be in for the rest of my life, because I've just taken my time. And all the people there, not all the people, but there were like one gaggle of people, let's say, and they were all in their 80s and 90s. And I was like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God. But they were on the dance floor.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is happening here? And I just said to my, I just turned around, I forget who I was with. And I was like, there's something to this putting your thoughts and feelings into words shit. I'm in. I'm
Yeah.
100% in. Like, there's so much freedom in it when you can do that and experience like what that is like, that relief, and like to be able to add this other component to that work. I mean, in the physical body, just imagine what that tango would have looked like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, the important thing is that they're having fun while doing it, but yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. So yeah, it's funny because now as I'm reading this slide and I'm like, okay, so some of the categories that we look into for Indigo 108 and for this work is digestion, sleep, anxiety, and depression and immune function. And then I'm like, oh, you know what? But I just want to end. I want us to end on but what, that increasing harmony in life part. I love that we're ending with this image of 80 and 90-year-olds dancing
Yeah.
tango.
Yeah.
Because what's the why? The why is like for the joy of life, for the harmony of life, for the relationships, for like showing up in the way that you want to show up, and making, just being part of all of your communities and
Yeah. And being
the
in it and
world
present.
in a positive, vibrant, vital way.
Yes. I think vibrant and vital are two words that we will continue to repurpose as we continue to talk about this program and talk about, I mean, if we actually use those words, which I know I will probably do that, to describe why people would go to therapy, like, because therapy is like, another thing for me is to like really take the stigma out of going to therapy. Like, therapy can be terrible, challenging, uncomfortable, all of the things. But the other side of that is that vibrant, joyful life that it's in the seedlings of it, that every therapist hopes for their patients. Oh,
Now I'm back on and
thank
I
you,
can
Paul.
see your comments, Patricia. Thank you.
So our next steps are our official launch of Indigo 108 is on the solstice in September 21st. So we will, there'll be all sorts of information. So please follow us at BeWELL.psychotherapy on Instagram, and go to our website, BeWELLpsychotherapy.com, to learn a little bit more, and sign up for our newsletter. When you get there, just go straight in, right on the front page, sign up for the newsletter. You're going to get little snippets every week about what's happening in the program and how to work best with Liz, and all sorts of things. You're going to be able to find out all sorts of stuff about us. So, Liz, do you have anything else you want to add? Because I think we're going to have to stop here.
Yeah, let's just stop here and go be vibrant and vital.
Okay, let's do it. I think we need one person to jump in.
To help us stop?
We need one
Okay.
person to help us stop.
Oh, okay. Well, that
And there
person
she
is
is.
helping us.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.